Can I make a confession to you? Whenever I read out the story of the preaching of John the Baptist in the Gospel of Luke, I do a bit of a double take. There's something about it that doesn't quite seem right to me. And the thing that trips me up is the summary of the preaching of John that Luke tags on to the end of it. So, he writes, with many other exhortations, he proclaimed the good news to the people. Now that's pretty clearly the gospel writer's take on what it is that John is doing. These words aren't found anywhere else in the gospel record. It doesn't appear to be an oral tradition. No, this is Luke. Luke looking at the message of the Baptist and saying, yeah, that sounds like a whole lot of good news. But let me ask you, in what John the Baptist just said, what sounds like good news to you? John has just spent a whole lot of time calling the people who came out in good faith to listen to him a brood of vipers. He's been talking about the wrath to come, warning people that it's going to be hard to escape. And he says that the axe is lying at the root of the trees. Every tree, therefore, that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. That good news? He's talking about how our people are going to be sorted like wheat is separated from the chaff by a winnowing fork. And he says that a good number of them are about to be burned with fire. No, not really your average good news report. So I do kind of wince when I read it. Kind of makes me wonder, is Luke trying to be ironic here? But you know, when I think about it, maybe my problem with Luke's summary is the same problem that I have with the season of Advent. Because you know what? Advent is a bit of an ironic season in the life of the church. There are all these uplifting, wonderful themes that run through the season of Advent. Hope, love, peace, and joy. It is considered, at least in our society, to be part of the Christmas season, and so we often also focus on heartwarming stories and hopeful ideals. And of course, because we cannot wait, we go ahead and start singing Christmas carols with all of the nostalgia and the good feelings that come with those. Advent has this feeling of a really good news season. But have you read the passages that we usually read in church during this season? They are full of disaster and destruction and all the elements of the Baptist's speech. It is a season of apocalyptic fire and floods, of pestilence and persecution. And because Advent is not about preparing for Christmas, as far as the church is concerned, we do not spend this season anticipating the Son of God born in a manger, but rather looking forward to the coming of the Son of Man with clouds and glory at the end of all things. But look at it this way. There are two kinds of good news. There's a kind of good news that is basically just a puff piece. And puff pieces are stories that are meant to distract and to divert. They are stories that focus on the positive aspect of a person or event without really acknowledging that there might be a negative side. And there's a lot of that kind of news at Christmas time, as the media often pitches in to make sure everyone's in the right mood to do a lot of shopping. And I guess that's all well and good. I mean, sure, sometimes we need to take a break from all the serious news. But I would argue that good news is supposed to be about more than just looking at the bright side of everything. And if that's all it is, it's really just a practice of denialism. Now, I would say that truly good news needs to grapple with the dark side of life, not just the bright side. And that's what I see John doing in this passage. It is also what I do see the church struggling with at this season of the year. And that's a good thing. When the people come out to John, he doesn't sugarcoat the situation for them. He actually demands that they come to terms with what is going on in the world. I am sure that if John were preaching today, he would demand that we face the problems that plague us today, the homelessness crisis, the opioid epidemic, the climate crisis. And no doubt, John would be very forceful in his presentation of these problems and threats. But as inflammatory as John's language would be, and I do mean literally inflammatory, there would be one thing that would make it good news. One thing. See, the people who come out to see John ask him this: what then should we do? And the good news is that John has an answer to that question. When you are facing a crisis or dealing with a problem and you cannot do anything about it, well, that is nothing but bad news. But if you can do something, that changes your perspective on everything. And that doesn't mean you have to have the ability to totally resolve or to fix everything that's wrong. Oh, that's a mistake that people often make, and it leads to despair, and often to nothing getting done at all. For example, sometimes people look at the whole problem of global climate change and they say, that's so huge, anything I would personally do would be but a drop in the bucket. I might as well not even try. And that's exactly the attitude that leads to a lot of discouragement and disillusionment. But I think it's important to remember that even if you do not have the means to influence or the influence to fix everything that is wrong, if you can take a right action, if you can be part of a solution, even in a small way, that makes all the difference in your attitude. Because guess what? It allows you to hold on to hope. And so John does give examples of the right kinds of actions that people can take. And interestingly, he is able to recognize that different people are in different positions and that requires that they take different kinds of actions in order to be effective. So let's take a look at the specific actions that John encourages the people to take. He speaks to the soldiers. And it's not entirely clear who these soldiers are. They might be Roman legionary forces, of course, but that would seem a little bit strange to have members of a foreign occupying force going out to see a figure like John. So it's maybe more likely that they are members of some local militia. But whoever they are, it's pretty clear what they represent. They are the official defenders of the system according to which the world works. They are the ones who ensure that the wealthy get to keep their wealth while the poor stay in their place. They are the ones who wield the violence that exploits the people for the benefit of the powerful. They don't have much choice in the matter because they're soldiers, and wherever their sympathies may lie, they have to follow orders. Well, to them, what does the Baptist say? Do not extort money from anyone by threats or false accusations, and be satisfied with your wages. And think for a moment about what that means. These are people who are caught up in a system of exploitation. They are the defenders of the system itself. And yet John is challenging them to take a stand by not personally being part of that systemic exploitation, or at least not to use it for their own ends. He's encouraging them in whatever small ways they can to actually undermine the system from within. He gives the same advice to the tax collectors. And here you need to understand that there was nothing in the Roman Empire that was more riddled with corruption and exploitation than the tax system, because it was designed to work that way. Tax collectors were not government employees. They were independent contractors who had bid to get the gig, and so they actually weren't paid. And the only way they could earn a living was by squeezing extra out of it. And so from top to bottom, the entire tax system was riddled with individuals who were busy squeezing the people underneath them to get whatever they could. And the people on the bottom, the actual taxpayers, they got squeezed beyond what they could bear. So to the tax collectors, John says, collect no more than the amount prescribed for you. And he's asking a great deal. He is asking them to forego their source of income and profit, the only one they have. And his message seems to be that when you're caught up in a corrupt and exploitative system, you must do what you personally can do to step out of that system. And when you do so, it makes a powerful, transformative statement. So John speaks to the soldiers and the tax collectors. He has one more answer, which is directed towards the people in general. To them he says, whoever has 2 coats must share with anyone who has none. Whoever has food must do likewise. And you know what? This is the hardest one to hear, especially because it's directed explicitly to everyone. Nobody can say it doesn't apply to them. And this is an answer that attacks the basic underlying system that undergirds the very structure of society and makes it possible for some people to have a superabundance, while others just don't have enough to get by. And the point of this is not to villainize or to guilt those who have done well for themselves. I mean, if you have been successful in this life as a result of your talent or hard work, I mean, good for you. I don't think John's attacking you. No, what John is targeting is the system that allows for wild inequality between those who have and those who have not. And the reason why that happens has more to do with how we have structured society itself than it does with the acts of individuals. John understands that most individuals cannot change the system. But he says that if you have the means to, and if you want to be part of the solution instead of the problem, what you need to do is to start to look at your possessions in a very different way. And you need to start to see how can they be of service to those who are in the greatest need, instead of asking what they can do to make your life more comfortable. And this is the genius of the Baptist's good news message. He recognizes that there are corrupt and problematic systems at work in this world, and that they do create misery and that they do create evil. He sees these corrupt political, financial, and economic systems. And he recognizes that all of us, depending on our positions, whatever we do in this life, we are part of these corrupt systems. We can't help it. It's how the world works. And we cannot change those systems on our own. But he begins to put out there the dream of groups of people who decide to do things differently, who opt out of the systems in whatever ways they can. And he suggests that they are the ones who can change the world. The good news is this: you are not powerless in the face of the evil and the dysfunction of this world. The good news is that you have a part to play in God's work for redemption. And the good news is that as individuals, you may have little power to change anything. But if we do it together, we can radically remake the systems of this world. And that brings us finally to our challenge for this third Sunday in Advent. I think all of us, especially after the chaos of recent months, are in this place, the same place as the people who came out to John the Baptist in the wilderness. And we don't actually need him to tell us that the world's in a bit of a mess. I mean, we've all seen it. And we come looking for good news. And the good news that John gives us is that there's something that we can do. We can choose together not to live according to such corrupt and evil systems in this world. And that we will have an impact when we do that together. And that's actually what the purpose of the church is. It allows us to do this together. And my challenge to you this week is to take action and to be part of doing actually what this congregation is doing, to challenge and to correct the dysfunctional systems of our world. Because you know what? We are trying to do our best to address the inequality in this city by providing food through the food bank on a week-by-week basis. What can you do this week to support or encourage that? I think there's probably something you could do. We are doing what we can to reach out to families who are finding right now that they don't have enough tunics or cloaks or other pieces of clothing. And enabling them to enabling a way to get clothing from people who have enough to spare to those, and giving them to those who don't have enough. That's what Hope Clothing is. What can you do this week to support that endeavor? But above all, what we're trying to do in this church is we're trying to model a way of living out what John was asking of the people who came to him. Are we doing it perfectly? No. But the closer that we get to what John was asking for, the closer we get to what Jesus was calling for from his disciples, the more we're part of the solution instead of the problem. So you know what you can do this week to help all of that along? You can share. You can share what we're doing in this church with someone else. I mean, tell someone. Maybe share a link or a video on social media. Reach out and share with one person, even one, the difference that the good news that John announced has made in your life. You are part of the solution, part of the problem, not part of the problem. We are together. Thank you for the good news that John the Baptist gave us. Help us to embrace that good news and the hope it brings. Amen.